Good morning, Year 1. Welcome to today's English lesson. This term we've been learning about fairy tales and we've been focusing on the story Little Red Riding Hood. Now, you know this story really well now, so in today's English lesson, we're going to be focusing on writing our own version of the story. So we know that traditional tales, fairy tales, have a beginning here. They have a middle, which is where the problem is, and then they have an ending, which is the solution. That's where the problem is fixed. They have a setting, so where the story takes place, and they also have characters. So when we're writing our own story, we need to make sure that it follows this structure. It has a beginning, middle, end, a setting, and characters. Okay, this is a story map for a Little Red Riding Hood, and you know this story really well now. So you know in the beginning of the story, Little Red Riding Hood takes her grandma a basket full of fruit because her grandma is unwell. She walks through the deep, dark woods where she bumps into the cunning fox, who comes up with a really clever plan, and he races to Grandma's house. He shoves Grandma into the wardrobe and leaps into bed. He pretends to be Grandma and tries to eat up Little Red Riding Hood. So that's the problem in the story. And then we come towards the end of the story, and luckily there's a woodchopper there who saves the day. Okay, so you would have seen this yesterday where I put up a story planning template and I changed parts of the story to make my own version of Little Red Riding Hood. So I didn't change the entire story, I just changed some of the characters and I changed the problem and the solution a little bit. So over here, my characters in the story are still Little Red Riding Hood and Granny, but instead of the wolf, I have created my own character, which was the enormous cranky bear. I kept the beginning of the story the same. Oh, and I also kept the setting of the story the same as well. So in the beginning, Little Red Riding Hood was taking her grandmother a basket of food because she was sick. So that's just the beginning of the story. It's the same as the original Little Red Riding Hood. Now the middle is where I changed it just a little bit. So she was walking through the deep dark forest when she noticed an enormous angry bear behind her. She raced to her grandmother's house, but the bear followed it and tried to eat her and Granny. So the middle of the story, there's still a creature, an animal that's trying to eat Little Red Riding Hood, and she still goes to her granny's house, but I've changed it just a little bit. It's not quite the same as where the wolf was came up with a cunning plan. I've changed mine to make my own version of the story. And then, so that's the problem, and fairy tales and traditional tales have a solution. So that's when the problem is fixed. So I had to think to myself, okay, this is the problem I've created. Now, what's the solution? How are we going to solve this problem? So I've decided that the solution can be that Little Red Riding Hood realised that the bear was starving because he had been hibernating all winter, so she offered him some food, and they had a lovely picnic and that was the end of our story. So I've still used the basis of Little Red Riding Hood, but I've just changed some parts. So in today's lesson, what I would like you to do at home is write your own version of just the beginning of the story today. And I want you to be thinking about all of those wonderful wow words that we've come up with this term. So words like like cunning to describe the wolf, but you might come up with your own character. And the deep dark forest, raced, leapt. All of those lovely words that are in our planning as well. So I have written the beginning of my story, and I've also in red highlighted some words and some word endings as well. So listen to the beginning of the story that I have written. One warm, beautiful day, Little Red Riding Hood was walking calmly through the large, deep forest. She was going to her grandmother's house because she wasn't very well. So instead of just saying one day Little Red Riding Hood was walking in the woods, I've added some adjectives like warm and beautiful to describe the day. I've also used a word calmly to describe how Little Red Riding Hood was walking. And instead of just saying through the forest, I've written the large, deep forest. I've used adjectives here to make my writing more descriptive. So I would like you to have a go at writing the beginning of your story today. Make sure that your sentences always begin with a capital letter and they end with a full stop. Make sure that your writing makes sense. So say your sentence first before you pick up your pencil. Make sure you really know what you're going to write, and then you can have a go at writing it down on paper. Check, go back, read your writing to make sure it makes sense, and make sure you're using some interesting adjectives. So I'm going to put this example up on the page as well. I'll also put a word bank for you to use as well. You just have to write the beginning of the story today. Tomorrow we'll do the problem, and the day after we'll do the solution. I'm looking forward to reading your stories. Okay, bye.